Configure hardware system is accessed from this icon. I'm not intending going through every single option within this command because it contains a lot of settings and most of them are self-explanatory, and they're also covered extensively in the help documentation. But the important thing to note here is that any settings that you change in Configure Hardware System stay with your computer, or if you log on to a computer with a username, they stay with that username on that computer and are independent of any LSS surveys that you open. Unlike Configure DTM Display and Display Controls and Configure Legend, which stay with the survey, these are independent of every survey that you open. Let's just go through a few of the options and investigate them. Start off with Settings, Display. We can turn on and off the display of the tooltips, which are the ones that appear when you move over an icon. When you select Grid Cross in Configure DTM Display, how large do you want that grid cross to be? The default zoom factor for the display, the type of level position marker you want, a plus, a cross or an asterisk. You can go and change the physical screen ratio, which we wouldn't recommend unless you are having issues with the scaling on a separate monitor, and also the slope arrow display. So when you go to Configure DTM Display slope arrows, how big you want those slope arrows to be, and also if you put 0 in there, then it will only display slope arrows which you can fit within a triangle. Display colors. Here we can change the colors of stations, contours, errors, warnings and misclosures in any report windows that we get, traverse colors, and then other colors such as observation colors, triangles, grid, slope arrows, and also what color background you want and which highlight you want when it comes to doing things like query distance. You see the highlights red now, and the line that I'm drawing is also red. Back to Configure Hardware System. If I now change that back to white, whenever you make any changes and you come back to the main hardware and system menu, there will always be a Finish button available to you. If you do select Finish, you can immediately save these settings to the registry on your computer, or you can continue to use them without saving them, but when you close LSS it will ask you again whether you want to commit those changes to the registry. If I say save, it's saved those settings now immediately to the registry. General settings, a variety of other options available in here, including if you're in the process of editing a survey, the software decides that the previous screen took less than this amount of time to redisplay, then it will automatically redisplay the screen for you. If you turn that off and you're in the middle of editing, adding links and what have you, then it will not automatically refresh the screen and update things like triangles and contours. It's a bit of a balance, just getting the right amount here. Sometimes you may not want it to keep redisplaying as you go, in which case you would turn it off. We have default slope modes for when you're querying things like distances and slopes, and also whether you want a prompt every so many minutes to save the survey. If you do select this option, you'll get a dialog appear every 10 minutes to say, do you want to save the survey? If you want a reminder but you don't want a dialog, every 10 minutes the save icon will change from a red to a red with a clock in the corner. With this setting you don't need to do anything about it, it's just a reminder to you. We can turn on and off the automatic updates of the LSS software. we would always recommend that you turn this on. On some IT systems, the IT department may well have disabled the ability to do automatic updates, in which case every day that you run LSS it will tell you that it's been unable to check, and in which case you might need to disable the automatic updates. But your license entitles you to unlimited software updates as well as unlimited technical support. So if you do have the ability to update the software, then please leave that unticked. However your system is set up, please keep checking our monthly e-bulletins and also our website for any updates. You may be able to download the latest software as an entire setup install. Please keep up to date with the latest software. Several other options here which I won't go to in detail, but suffice it to say that it will be worth your while looking at these various different settings just to make sure whether they're applicable for your particular use of the software. We've got the default directional arrows for CAD Pro, length and width wise, the default folders for everything. Now the default folders are important because when you come to select a particular type of file, such as a plan description file, it needs to know roughly where it's going to be looking for that file, and you don't want this to be set up as My Documents. If all of the files are in a surveys folder, you want it to land on that folder by default without having to go and browse for a different location. Default font, default file editor. Whenever you open up a document such as a load file in LSS or a report file, you can open it up in your user-defined default text editor. Loaded text, any text that comes in as a 6 comma record in an LSS load file can be set to be a particular color, size, etc. Maximum values, these are just there to prevent any wildly inaccurate data from coming into LSS, such as huge distances away from the rest of the data and maximum grid intervals and this sort of stuff. New survey parameters, well, we've already looked at this in the configure survey parameters. This is where the defaults are set for every new survey, and very importantly, make sure that you are using the correct prototype every time and you're not having to go and browse for a new prototype every time you create a new survey. Set it in here and you won't have to change it again. Plotting, such as default line widths for plotting and level position markers. Pop-up menu, if I right mouse now I can get a selection of menu commands. I can repeat the previous command, I can repeat previously used commands, or depending on where the cursor is positioned, such as if it's positioned over or near an observation, when I right mouse it will offer to query that observation, query its coordinates, add some new features. If I click in space, chances are it has recognized that I'm nowhere near an observation, so I'm likely to want to add a surface to that area. In Configure Hardware System, pop-up menu, not only can you turn that function on and off, but you can make the display commands that you perform part of that list of previously used commands or not. Include context sensitivity is exactly as I've described, which means that it will check what's around the cursor and offer particular commands appropriate for that position. You can list the previous commands. Well, don't go mad on this, you'll run out of screen space if you have too many on that list, but you might want, say, the last 5 previously used commands, either in order or by popularity. So if you've selected a command several times, then that's going to appear higher up than a command that hasn't been used very often. Or in order, the latest one will be at the top. Include again dynamic commands or not. Dynamic commands are all those commands from the pull down menu that have an asterisk after them, and they're the ones that can be used whilst you're in the middle of another command. You can define a user list of commands, which means that if you're constantly doing report volumes or particular CAD Pro commands and you find it easy to right mouse and select the command rather than going over to the icon or the pull down menu, then you can select a maximum of 25 commands from the main list, which means you don't have to go up and select those elsewhere in the system. So if I say I want to go to add replace and insert observation, OK, finish, save. So I've got context sensitivity. I've added 2 new user-defined menu commands on that pop-up. Also, if you're inside a command, right mouse will offer mode, back and cancel. So mode will bring up the mode, which will save you going into the lower right hand corner and selecting mode. Alternatively, you can always hit the F10 button to bring up mode. Query sections, you can set the default size of the section window as a percentage of the total screen height. You can produce a test sheet with all of the LSS colors and color numbers on them. You can set up a digitizing tablet, and you can also add a survey logger.